now.
This meeting is being recorded by the host or a participant.
I just want to say that I won Judge's Choice Award at the Artist in Montreal on Zoom Valentine's Day art show in February. And this is the winner, Martini.
That's fantastic, Carol. Congratulations.
Yeah. Mazel tov.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice.
So, everyone, today we're doing our Read What You Want Romance Edition. It was delayed from last week on Valentine's Day. And I am curious to know what kind, I've heard from a few of you, some of the books that you've been reading, but I'm looking forward to hearing more. Tell me about your romance. Tell me about all the romance in your lives.
Oh, okay. I was going to email you, but
down? Are you writing them down?
Pardon? It's on the recording.
Oh,
so I mean, I'll include it in the follow-up email, the different books that we've talked about.
Great.
Okay. I read The Matchmaker's Gift.
The Matchmaker's Gift. Tell us about it.
Which is a wonderful book.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story about grandmother and a granddaughter, and the grandmother was a matchmaker in her younger days, and her granddaughter learned all about it, and the granddaughter was never married, but the grandmother was sure that she would have a perfect match for her. Anyway, I don't want to give anything else away because it's too good a read to spoil, but I really recommend it.
Okay.
Sounds good. Is it a new book or an older book?
I'm not sure. Actually, I don't think it's that old.
Mm-hmm. Is it a Europe book? Is it from the European kind of thing? She was a matchmaker in Europe, or she's a matchmaker here in our world?
Yeah, I think she was a matchmaker on the ship coming from, I think they were coming from Russia to the States. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's an excellent, excellent book.
Sounds good. I think I'd be interested.
It looks like it just came out. It just came out last fall.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Who is the author? I forget.
Linda Cohen-Loigman.
Loigman, right. Yeah, she also wrote, I think, if I'm not mistaken, no, that was a shoe story was Judith Rosen, I think. That was also a very good book. I think I mentioned that earlier, a shoe story.
Shoe story.
The shoe story?
Yeah, a shoe story.
Is that a love story too?
Is this a love story? Yes, but it has to do with art, and it's a lovely, lovely book.
Yeah.
And I just finished the last summer at Chelsea Beach.
Mm-hmm. And?
Which is by Pam Jenoff.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a very, very good read, very heartwarming.
That's one of the things that I liked about this theme this time around was just like, I don't know about you guys, what you usually, well, I know about some of you, what you usually read, but I feel like I go through different phases, and lately I've been in very kind of more literary kind of veins, and not to say that it's like, obviously they're enjoyable books in different ways and I'm learning things and everything, but they're reading the sort of more like focusing on the romantic theme. They do have a tendency towards heartwarming, right? We have like these story arcs where our main characters maybe are lacking confidence or like have things that they need to work on in themselves as well, and that like as the story progresses we see not just the way the romance the romantic relationship progresses, but also like their own character development and their sort of recognitions of and it's like everything gets better, as a tendency, like things just tend to just get better, which is sort of a nice change.
One last thing, and then I'll let somebody else talk, but I wanted something really light, and I read the Wedding Dress by Danielle Steele. Now, I know she doesn't do put a lot of research into her books, but I have to tell you that this is a wonderful, wonderful story. It's
Is it one of her new
generations.
ones, Shirley? One of her newer ones?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it came out in 2020.
Oh,
The Wedding Dress. It's really, really good. It's like generational, and it's worth reading.
And Carol Blank just made it in.
yeah.
Oh, wait a minute,
Hi.
I see her face. Wait a minute, I see her face.
Okay,
Is that her face?
I'm in the car and I'm driving.
Oh,
You shouldn't actually be on the phone while you're driving, Carol.
No.
That's terrible.
Oh, well, it's on the seat beside me. Is that no good?
That's okay.
No. Oh,
If you're a
Your
police,
hands are in the
is that
good position on the steering wheel. It's okay.
no, it's not. I got it. Hi, lady.
hi.
Sorry. Good
Hello.
morning, everybody. Okay. The maturity level of a flea. Go for it.
Look what you do,
Okay.
Katie. Look how stuff go to us.
We always seem to dismiss Danielle Steele as trite, don't we? Like, don't we always say, oh, it's the same old, same old? But isn't her theme mostly love stories? I haven't read
Okay.
her in so
Yes,
long.
yes, and I just want to tell you, Shirley, you said The Wedding Dress, but I read something else by her, and I'm just going to look up the title, and it wasn't a love story. It was actual somebody. Anyway, it was very good. It wasn't the
was it The Good Fight?
no. So
Because that was
Katie,
like,
yeah,
I would
wanna ask
say
you.
I wouldn't actually, it's funny because I think the same thing where oftentimes when I think Danielle Steele, I think romance,
Right.
but I don't think that that's actually true. I think
Oh.
that by and large, she ends up like she writes more sort of what I, as a librarian, would characterize as women's lives and relationships.
Mhm.
Like it's about like oftentimes, especially her older books, romance played a really large part in it. But now it seems to like she really like, and I do tend to think of her as being kind of formulaic, but I think that she has switched her formula around a little bit too with like she's written some suspense type ones, more about like,
I can't hear that. It sounds terrible. Sorry.
Okay, I found the title. It's called Beautiful.
It's terrible.
And it's
Yes, I read it.
It could be based on a true story about a very beautiful model or whatever. She has an accident and her face becomes disfigured. And she talks about how she goes through her life like that. And like I say, it's not a love story. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
What's it called
story.
again? Is it a true story? Is it a true
No.
story?
No, beautiful.
Oh.
She writes for fiction. So yeah,
Oh, beautiful.
that was it. Now, Katie, I need to ask you with the new system. I can't find a list of what I've taken out since the new system started. Shouldn't there be my reading list? I have nothing on
Yeah.
my reading list. Okay, I'll look into it another time.
Well,
when
if you want, we can talk after this.
Yeah, it's fine. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Getting back to Danielle Steele, I stopped reading her a few years ago because I found it was ridiculous. She was turning out the most ridiculous. Don't you agree, Carol? I mean, she was turning out the
Yeah.
most ridiculous books. And now I think I don't know, maybe she's gone back to the original when we all read her 20 years ago.
Well, this is why I picked up the book Beautiful, because there was a review about it. And just as Katie said, she's changed. And just as Shirley just said, The Wedding Dress, also, it's not her syrupy rich woman falling in love with.
She became ridiculous after a while. It was a waste of time.
Yeah, so like I say, time to pick her up again because.
Oh, I'm glad you're telling me. I'm going to do that. That's a great idea.
Shirley, what made you
read? A good read.
Shirley, what made you pick up The Wedding Dress by her?
Because I looked at the cover and I read the synopsis, and it sounded good.
Oh. And the year was 2020, you said?
I think so.
Yeah, so that's relatively new. I don't know.
Right.
I wonder if she listened to, Katie, does this happen? Do the authors listen to their readers? Maybe they were complaining, or what happens in a case like that?
I mean, who knows? Danielle Steele, I mean, she's like, I have absolutely no idea. But she comes out with like, 6 books a year.
Exactly.
She has, and she seems very methodical. Like she may have ghostwriters, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it. And like, a little bit about her personal history. Like
Oh,
she's been
no.
married like multiple times. She has something like 1 million children. She has,
Oh, wow.
And
like
she
it
still has
seems
time
like,
and she still has time to write. Interesting.
but this is, well, her children are all grown, or like she,
Mhm.
like fairly notably, she had lost a son. She wrote a nonfiction book about her son and who she'd lost, and but it just seems like when I learned more, and I only know a little bit about her, but like when I learned a little bit more about her life, I was like, I mean, I haven't read her in years. I did think about reading her for
Right,
this
because
meeting,
it's
and then
romance.
I got caught up in other things. So, but yeah, it was. I was thinking, wow, it's sort of like she must have written, like it must have started like reflecting, write what you know, sort of thing, because she seems like she grew up like, and married upper class and
What I would think,
ambitious and
what I would think is like what Rona said, people got tired of the same old cookie cutter type.
Exactly.
So
That's what happened to me.
it might have affected her sales. And that's how she probably looked at it.
I would be
I
shocked if
wonder. I
I would be
wonder.
shocked if
Oh, take it
anything
out.
affected Danielle Steele's sales in a negative
Okay.
enough way.
Scrap
But
that.
I wouldn't be surprised. This is a funny thing, and it might just be my perspective, my perception, sorry, of her. But I feel like even though she's so crazily successful, I feel like she really is, like she really does care what her fan base wants. And like that she seems like the type, like it wouldn't surprise me to find out that she answered fan mail herself. Do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't surprise me to find that out. She seems like, as much as she's sort of up there and seems like she'd have no connection, that she would actually make an effort to have a connection.
Mhm.
And I think that's
Well-
one of the reasons why she stayed so popular for all of these years.
I just want to tell you something taken from a different viewpoint. I sort books for the book sale at the library. And I used to get tons of Danielle Steele. And I have to tell you, I don't get anything from, turned in books anymore, nothing. So her sales, who knows if it's affected her sales or not.
Right.
But I just find it very strange that I don't have anything from Danielle Steele. And I used to band them all together, and there were so many now. So watch, tomorrow I'll go in and there'll be 50 of them. Anyhow, I have to press done speaking and a police car went by.
Oh dear.
Well, I have to say that I would have been the first one to reach for Jodi Picoult or Danielle Steele as far as romance novels are concerned, the sappiest ones. But I listened to our esteemed leader, Katie, and I read Wuthering Heights. Oh my God. Oh my God. I never found anything more difficult to get into, with the swooning and the fainting and all the all those Victorian love stories, but I stuck with it. And to be honest with you, I saw so much in it. Like, you compare Danielle Steele to what's her name, Emily Bronte. Like, oh my God, the love stories then and the love stories that you read now. What a difference, really. What a complete difference. They are love stories, but they're so intense, and they're so, they were the swooning and the fainting and it's just unbelievable. The prose is so different, and it's something you have to, Katie, I think I have to read this 3 or 4 times to really get into it. There are not so many themes, not only the love story, but also there's other themes of mental health and and how people behaved, and they could all use a good psychiatrist's couch, you know. But the intense love story, there's nothing like it. That's how
And
I
also with that book too, like also the way that the nature reflects what's going on in like the people's
outside.
lives and
Yes,
everything
yes,
too,
it's
right? It's like,
unbelievable. You know, you put Emily Bronte together with Danielle Steele, and I love Danielle Steele, but my God, you learn so much. It's like broadens your horizons to read, like even Jane Eyre or things that I never really read. But like, there's such a difference is that a change of writing since
Content,
the
yeah.
1800s?
of
Is it the
course.
way people are, the life changed, and then the writing changed? It became not as deep. It became more surface. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
there's a
know.
lot. I think there's a lot to it. Like, I mean, you can't discount the culture too, right? Like this is one of the things with like Emily Bronte. I mean, like think about the world that she was living in, right? With like a
Right.
lot of repression and a lot of like again, like in terms of like someone wouldn't just go up to like well, first of all, a woman would never go up to a man and just ask him out, for example. Like that's a lot of the
Of
modern
course.
romances is like the where women initiate sort of something and it couldn't be done overtly. It would have to be done just like, oh, I have to position myself. And there was a lot more, I think, kind of plotting, but also
And
there
how
was a
men looked on women as well. I mean, there's
Mhm.
no question about it. But that's what really got me, the change in the love and the romance in that era and this era. That really brought that, I found very interesting. And poor her, she died at 30. She never had a chance to put, you know, to write so many novels like Danielle Steele and the others. She never evolved.
But
I
still
wonder if
she
she
wrote
would have
so much. A lot
evolved.
of her writing was lost, right? But she was writing from a really young age.
Young
And then
age.
like her like the social situations in that time were very different too, right?
Of
Like it's the
course, of
same as like
course.
and I think that's one of the reasons why with Wuthering Heights, like there's a lot of passion in Wuthering Heights
That's
that
it, exactly.
that is sort of shocking. Like it's like explosive. And one of the reasons I think why it is so explosive is because it's being contrasted against the very staid sort of um acceptance of like how one should behave and they're not behaving the way one should behave in present day like western you know world in the western world
Mhm.
there's so many different ways of being oh
That's me because the reason is I'm doing this. I don't know how to do it now. I don't know what to. It's because your face I can't hear you. You're freezing all the time.
okay well I muted you on one of your screens Roseanne now
Okay,
you're
that was-
frozen probably because being connected with two devices has
know what to do. Interfered.
yeah is maybe a little problematic with your Wi-Fi, but you're gonna have to. Do you want me to kick one of you out?
Yeah, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get out of here.
Okay, let's see. I'm removing your muted person. No, I can't. Otherwise, I have to report
Okay,
you.
I'm gonna close my machine. I'm just gonna close it. Okay, I'm gonna close it now. That's I'm just closing
Okay.
it. All right, now I'm on my phone. Let's see what happens now. I just couldn't hear you. You were freezing so much.
Okay.
Oh, you're freezing now. Okay.
Katie, do you think romance novels?
Hold it. Hold it.
Oh,
What?
that was Addie. I think someone's at her door.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just
See?
muting him for right now.
I
Katie,
have
do you
never
think
read Daniel Steele. Can you believe it? Because I don't, the idea of reading somebody who's written 6 novels a year, it's just mass produced. So I haven't read any of her books.
Oh, it's the same as like Daniel Silva, as like
Yeah.
really any of those sort of big authors that just like
Tom
they
Clancy? Yeah, a lot
yeah.
of them. Yeah.
But
I just
sorry,
wanted
Rona?
to say one thing. Do you think romance novels like reflect the age? Like Splendor in the Grass. Was it a book? I don't know, but it was a movie in the 60s. and these two people pine for each other, even Picnic, you know, the romance between two people, but the era wouldn't allow, like, you know, like getting together, so to speak, sexually. Everybody was sexually repressed, and those were also really romance movies, unless they were books. I know we're doing books, but I find like that really shows you the difference of pure romance in different eras and different, you know, how we
Okay, hold on. I have something to say.
Go ahead, Roseanne.
I have something to say. We're at different ages too. When you read it when you were 25 and 45, it's different now when you're 75. We don't look at it the same.
That's a good point.
Of course,
that's a good point. Like we see how ridiculous it is. Like, you know, I saw the movie Split the Grass. I loved it as a teenager and thought it was the stupidest thing when I watched it now. But talk about romance. That was romance in the 60s. Every era has a different type of romance novel.
But I think that's a very excellent point. This is like our popular culture is reflected in our art that is created, right? So like, sorry, our culture is reflected in popular culture, right? So this is, well, they didn't have movies then, like in the 1800s, they had plays. And that was part of, again, like this reflection of what people were interested in. They had leaflets, they had pamphlets, they had books, they had, you know, so like those things were reflecting partly what society was like, but also what they wanted society to be like. So like in the same sort of way where like a lot of the books that were like, oh, these will be popular among young women, so we want young women to know how to behave, so we want to let them know what the sort of expected behavior is. And similarly, now it's like the same as like even reading books from, 20 years ago, the norms, the languages that's used, but also with movies, right? So like a movie that you loved 20 years ago, it's sort of like Roseanne was saying, part of it is our age, but also part of it is the development of our culture in terms of what is acceptable, what is funny, what is political correctness, what is, all of these things become reflected in the things that we're creating, the things that we're asking that our society is watching and absorbing, whether it's through books, through movies, through television, through plays, whatever.
You're right.
And I think our concepts of romance have changed a lot. Like Wuthering Heights is a great example, right? Like, I mean, I do not discount that passion. Like, again, reading it, like, it's just like, yes, I feel the passion between Catherine and Heathcliff. But you take one little step away, and just like, that is a terrible person. Like that is a toxic relationship. Like,
absolutely
terrible.
Saying, like,
but when
give
you're
me a break.
But when you're absorbed, when you're like in the story, you're in it and you see it and you're just like, of course. And then as soon as you take a step back, you're like, terrible.
It's unrequited love in personified. I mean, like,
it's not even unrequited though. That's the crazy thing, is that like they love each other. They're just like, well, she's not so terrible. She's a little terrible, but it's just like, it's just terrible. Like, it's like they don't know how to.
The devil reincarnated. And she at one point says, I am him. We're both the devil or something like that. You know, we are both the same. It was like, oh, way over the top. Way over the top.
But they both believe it too. And that's another thing too, right? Like shared ideologies, shared beliefs.
What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're hello.
Wuthering Heights.
What you're talking about.
Okay, Roseanne, you don't have to freak out. We're talking about Wuthering Heights.
I didn't know. Yeah, but I didn't know what book you were talking about.
It's hard to tell you when you're talking over them. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. That's what Rona's been talking about throughout.
No, I heard that at the beginning, but I didn't know you were still talking about the same thing because you started talking about Jane Eyre. I thought, okay.
Well, she mentioned,
I never read Jane Eyre, but I think I might. Is that considered a real romance novel too?
Oh, yeah.
I would definitely say.
Oh, yeah.
Really? I think I'm going to read that one next after reading this one. I think I will.
Addie, it's nice to see you back. I had to mute you just because it was we could hear too much. I don't know how to get you to unmute. I'm sorry. No, Addie.
There's a whole genre of books that nobody's brought up yet. How
Do
about
it.
the
What, we're still
Harlequin
talking
novels?
about romance books?
Ah, Harlequin novel. That's a
Do you
good,
remember
I
those?
never even thought of that. They
Oh,
all seem
God.
so lousy.
Carol, did you read a Harlequin romance?
Are you kidding? Again, it's my being in the dungeon in the library and all these Harlequin books that started to show up at one point. Again, not showing up now, but those, I mean, just looking at the cover is enough to say, oh my God, I can't read. I can't even be seen with it. Pull out the garbage bag and cover it, or make a book,
Hold it,
cover
hold it, hold it. You
Uh-oh,
were
somebody likes
part
them.
of the Between the Covers book club on Monday nights with,
geez, for sure. That was my
all right.
next one. You beat me to it, Carol.
So I can't, I'm sorry, I can't believe that I actually read that genre because of Murray.
Zoom meeting.
What
And
genre?
so did
Harlequin.
romance, Harlequin Between the Covers, and so did Roseanne. And some of us loved the sexy scenes. Okay, we were guilty as charged, but I'll tell you the two books I really liked was The Other Miss Bridgerton. There was a lot of flirting going on with the pirate, and anyway, it was very good. And there were a couple of others where there were some very sex scenes. So I made a joke that it was never enough for me. And the other book, which isn't so much sex, and it's not a Harlequin, it's When We Left Cuba, and it's a love story. We're talking romance. That's by Chanel Clayton. She also wrote, and I think I'm going to read it, The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba. I think it's the same author. I never got around to reading that. It was a lot of education on how the Cubans left to go to Florida when Castro came into power, and how they blamed him for a lot of things. And she meets a senator, and they have an affair, and it's an excellent book. It's a easy read, and then they talk about Kennedy and the Bay of Pigs. So there's a lot of things we can sort of remember. So I highly recommend it. When We Left Cuba.
Okay. Just to get back to the whole Harlequin thing, I'm just going to throw this out there, is that there was I can't remember if it was an entire class that I took or if it was just like a subsection of a class that I took when I did a degree in sociology, all about the Harlequin romance novels and sort of when they first came out, and they were, made available in grocery stores and drugstores and things like this, and how actually they can be looked at as revolutionary in just like their existence, their mass dispersion, the availability that they made to women, housewives, right? Primarily when they first came out. And I'm just gonna say that.
Well, let me just add, okay? The covers were really
Bodice rippers.
Yeah, they weren't even sexy.
Exactly.
They were just annoying, to tell you the truth. They did nothing for me.
Mm.
But I want to say, like you said,
At 75, but at 25, it was probably a little bit different.
I don't know. I never picked it up. I don't know.
That's it.
Okay, but then came along this other author with 50 Shades of Grey.
Mm.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And all the other 50 Shades, whatever they were called. So that to me is also like on the same lines as the Harlequin.
Mm.
Yep.
Oh,
There was
no.
another author, Sandra Brown, I think she was called.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote all these like sex personified books.
Yeah, that's so Sandra Brown, I might be wrong. I think Sandra Brown and JD Robb are the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You're
that
kidding me.
I
You're
think
kidding.
so. And that's, well, let me just double check because I don't want to.
What's the name? J.D. Roberts?
JD
Robb.
Robb. Never
Oh.
heard. Never heard
I
of that.
remember like reading Sandra Brown.
like Joy Fielding.
Years and years and years ago.
But could some romance novels be under the subsection of titillating? You know, I mean, you have some romance novels that are like so trite and titillating with lots of sex, sex and so on. I mean, you've got different areas of romance novels, or some make it with more sex, some make it with more, the titillation. Do you think so? And some are just like real love that between two people. You've got different subdivisions, I think, under romance novels. No?
Oh, for sure. And
50
I was
Shades of
wrong.
Grey,
It's
I
not.
did the first
sorry.
25 pages and realized it's a pedophile. I'm not reading the rest.
Yeah. I'll say I lied. It wasn't Sandra Brown and JD Robb. It's Nora Roberts and JD Robb.
right,
That's the
Nora
same
Roberts,
writer.
I remember.
That's the same writer.
Oh,
But one of the
really?
reasons why she writes, and so Nora Roberts is also very known for romance.
Mhm.
And JD Robb are known as the suspense. Can be romantic
Right.
suspense, but this is it, is that it's like the target audience, so that you know that you're not gonna, when you pick up a Sandra Brown novel, you're not expecting it to be like murdery. Sorry, not Sandra Brown, Nora Roberts. Whereas when you pick up a JD Robb novel, you're expecting a murder to happen at some point. And there are, so many different subgenres of romance. I agree.
That's it. Mhm.
Well, can I just tell you that I have a girlfriend who is a writer, and while she was waiting for her books to be published and, finally make some money, hopefully, she wrote Harlequin books because it's a formula.
Yep.
And she could just pump them out, and
Right,
it kept
they
her
make
in
money.
food for a period of time. But I mean, she wasn't proud of the Harlequin. She had a different name for Harlequin than she did for her other novels, but it paid the bills. So, some of this stuff, they pump them out one after the other. Girl meets boy, has a problem, and then ends up with the same thing, each one, if you read them. I haven't read them, but I'm told.
Just who are these Harlequin romance books aimed at? Like, who is the target audience? Is it like, I don't know, like
Me,
less
now,
educated?
me.
No, I was going to say less educated people, but now that you're saying you like it, I'll take that back. But
No,
isn't
no,
there
no.
a target audience for that?
Definitely. I think so. Absolutely. And especially you say they were sold in supermarkets.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah, because we were shocked when Mairead suggested some of these books, but they were good, like the
And they were
Bridgerton
cheap.
series.
They were also
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
They were the
inexpensive. That's
cheapest
true.
books around.
they were accessible, right? Like that's part of the
true.
thing. So I think, initially they were aimed at housewives.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing is that there are tons of novels now that aren't Harlequin, but that would fit into what I think most of us would say, oh, that's like a Harlequin romance, right?
Mhm.
These Regency romance novels like Mary Below, or who is it? Like, is there Mary
The
Jo Putney,
Heiress.
maybe? There's just like, there are a bunch of authors who write, and then it's like, oh, it's a Highland
The
romance,
Bridgertons.
or it's
That could be a Harlequin.
oh, for sure. And this is part of it, is again like the time that it's set in, but also then it has a little bit more sex, or a little bit more, like it has a little, it's not as sort of backed away as it would be if it was something that was written in the time. But this is part of, I think, the appeal of this kind of book is, one is the happy ending, right? There's always a happy ending. Everything always works out. I used to work with someone who exclusively read romance novels. And she used to say, I've had enough bad things happen in my life. I don't need to read about that.
Yeah, I agree with her. I've done
So
that.
like,
Lots of people feel that way.
people read for
yeah.
so many different reasons, and
Right.
Yeah.
it's, for some of us it's escapism, for some it's learning, for some, and sometimes it depends on the mood, right? It's the same as again, like, to relate this back into with movies and everything too, Rona, like it's sometimes you just feel like a shoot 'em up action movie, and sometimes you want to watch something with depth. Do you know?
Mhm.
And I think that's the same with books for a lot of us, is that
Oh.
sometimes, like I've said many times, I read everything. sometimes I'm reading nonfiction and it's a slower read, it's whatever. Sometimes I'm reading a book that, you know, I read in 4 hours and it's just like,
Right.
that was fun. You know, it's like cotton candy. But there's, you know, there's definitely like I working at the reference desk up here, like someone who's going through cancer treatment, usually they don't want something heavy to
Right,
read in the
right.
waiting room. They want something light. They want something happy.
There's
And they're
something for everyone.
right, and they're uncomplicated.
Yep.
It's usually just two characters. Like some of the books, you know, reading now, I have to try to follow who our characters are. Bang, I
Right.
close it, back to the
Yep.
library. I'm not taking a test, you know.
Yep.
So that's it's easy. It's easy reading, and you know,
Yeah.
with a bit with some sex in it.
Which is not a bad thing,
Okay,
right?
so
Like,
let's go. So what are we reading? Them I want to hear what we're reading now. Oh, hello.
oh, sorry, Roseanne, you were echoey a little bit there.
Hi, sweetheart.
You know what? We've
Okay.
heard a little bit about what some of the others have read. What did you read, Romancy? Roseanne?
Okay, well, first of all, I have a cat. Oh, all right, I'm a dog person, and I heard you talk, but I don't know if everybody was on, but I have had dogs all my life since I was 7 years old until I was 40. But then my last dog I had to put down, and because I was in an apartment, there's no way I was getting another dog. But so I had to get cats. But as you know, so therefore I read these kind of love stories. You know, these
What is
guys,
it?
David Rosenfeld is a real life person who saves dogs. He lives on a farm with, I think, 25 cats and dogs. I mean, all kinds of dogs. And he runs a rescue in real life. He runs a rescue dog operation. So this is mystery stories. Canine. I've read Canine. He's written a few books, and they've all got to do with dogs. One of the ones I talked about before, the whole book is written by a dog. This is not written by a dog. This is written just as a novel, but there are a few like that. So that's what I'm saying. You want a love story? This is my kind of love story.
So
but,
love story, but not romance.
but the other thing is,
We hope. We hope.
That's good.
but I haven't read these, but I have 25 books at home from the library, and you can see I have something like this. I have something like this.
Right. But
And
did
there's
you
some-
read them?
And why am I saying I'm showing the covers? Because this one I read. It's all got to do with the 35 to 45 year. And I think I'm fascinated by my mother's. I'd like to know more about my mother and father's life at their time during the war. I think that's what it is. Otherwise, why am I doing it? Love
Yeah.
watching the old movies of the 35 to 45, and all these are war stories. This is the one. I think she's written other books that I don't know, but I would imagine, because this is, I think, the first one of a woman who's a safe cracker. She's raised by her uncle, who's a safe cracker in the war in England, and but she gets caught, and her
Okay,
uncle and her gets
Roseanne,
caught.
excuse me, Roseanne,
Sorry.
it is very hard to see the covers because there's a glare. Can you
It's
say the
called-
name? Can you name the
sorry.
book?
A Peculiar Combination
Thank you.
by Ashley Weaver. I think that what's happened here is she's written other books, because I think that this is the first one, and this is from 2021. So I don't know if she's written another one, but so what happens was she gets caught and she gets taken to what she thought was a police station, but
Hello?
she ends up to be a spy.
Hello?
She's recruited.
Oh, it's Addie on the phone.
It's okay.
She's
I've muted
recruited
her.
by the spy network of England, and so she goes around and she safe cracks for the spot for the organ, and she's falling in love. You could see, and he's falling in love with this very straight-laced major in the army who's head of this MIA. So I'm sure that's going to get places. But what I'm reading now, oh my God, I love it. Miss
Major Pettigrew.
Pettigrew's Last Stand.
What's
An
it called?
old man, 68 years old, with very major again in the army from 1945. And in this is modern times though. And what I like about this book he's so old fashioned because he's 68 years old. His wife has died about 3 years before, and he's so prim and proper of the English thing. And of course, his children are not. His child is not. His girlfriend, his child's fiance is not. They're no way, and the people he meets no way. But the 58-year-old Pakistani lady is also very, very prim and proper. But again, because it's England and it's not so easy between them. But I have to say, now you want to know pros? He talks.
What is it called? We can't see.
Major Pettigrew's
Major
Last Stand.
Pettigrew's Last Stand. And it must have been a popular book because it's
Yes.
copy 6.
Yeah. It was a very, very popular book.
2010. Copy 6. I don't know if there's, but I just, you want to read a book about what it's like today. Oh, was it? I don't know. I just picked it out of, I looked up senior citizen books. And this came out.
Did Lady Chatterley's Lover come under that
Not
too?
at all. Not at all. No. What is so nice about
Yes,
it?
oh,
because
yes.
You see that he is so stuck on manners. And then you have the young people who they have no manners. So the book and his vocabulary and his prose, you could use a dictionary with this thing, but I don't bother but if you have any problem reading, I have to tell you, it's the smallest writing I have ever seen in my life. Can you read that? It is the worst.
Oh.
I had to go buy new glasses at the dollar store because I can't read with my regular glasses. But oh my God, wonderful! I highly recommend it from the library.
Well, you
Okay.
know, we own it in large print too. Hey, Roseanne?
Oh.
Doesn't matter. After
Just
reading
saying.
the 7 wives, 7 husbands of something of
Evelyn
of
Hugo.
Evelyn Hugo, weighed 150 pounds while I was reading it. My fingers were not as crooked as this until after I read it with the large print. It was 690 pages, and
Yeah.
the regular book is 300 and something. Forget it. No more large print for me. I now have these very.
Or
You should try-
magnifier. Get 'em.
But try reading. Do you ever read on a device? Like try reading on an e-reader, because then you can make the print as big as you want, and then it's just a small.
Like a Kindle or something, yeah.
Yeah, or a Kobo, like it's lighter. I know Carol and I need to talk about Kobo. No, we're not talking about Kobos. Never mind. Talking to someone else about Kobos.
That was me.
Yes. There we go. It was someone. I was talking to someone about it. Now, Addie, I'm sorry that I had to mute you again because you were on the phone. But can you unmute yourself? If you can, I'd love to know what you've been reading. Addie was telling me a little bit before. I'm just gonna start talking. We'll pretend that I'm Addie for a moment. She was telling me a little bit before that she read Viola Davis's memoir, Finding Me. And while what we were talking about wasn't romance related at the moment, because it has to do with her life, I presume that it sort of comes in at some point. I remember reading something about her years ago, an interview with her, and her talking about like basically the very, very, equally supportive sort of relationship that she had with her husband. And so I presume that would be in the book somewhere, but I don't know. No, Addie's shaking her head. So maybe not. It was more about, she apparently had quite a traumatic childhood. I'm sorry to have muted you, Addie. I'd love to hear. So Addie might have some, yeah, I don't know that she can unmute herself again. Sorry. Well, I'll tell you all one of the books that I read. My favorite one that I read was a reread on my part, and it's one of my favorite books. It's called Gut Symmetries by Jeanette Winterson. And it is a love story, like a love triangle story. So it's between two physicists and a poet. So one of the physicists and the poet are married. And then the physicist, like the husband of the husband-wife physicist poet couple, he works with our primary narrator, who's also a physicist, and they end up starting an affair. And then the poet, the wife poet, and the mistress end up starting a relationship together as well. And I first read it, I want to say 15 years ago, longer than that.
I haven't seen her.
Oh, Carol, I'm muting you.
Could you repeat the title again?
Name?
Gut?
Yeah, it's
Gut
called
Sim-
Gut Symmetries.
How do you spell that? Oh, Sims.
G-U-T
S- Yeah, it's-
SYMMETRIES.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And it is, well, first of all, if you haven't read Jeanette Winterson before, she's a British author. She writes beautifully. So her most famous novel was probably one of her first. It's called The Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. But she also has a book called Sexing the Cherry. She had she came out with takeoffs on Greek mythology a few years ago. It might be even 10 years ago because I'm very bad with time. But Gut Symmetries is my favorite of her books, and I have reread it. I haven't reread it in at least 5 years, but I used to reread it every year after the first time that I read it. And every time I would find new things, and I found like her turns of phrase just kind of beautiful, and especially because one of the characters is a poet, and actually she's like she's Jewish, and it's a lot of Jewish sort of mythology comes out in the story a little bit as well. I can't say too much about it because it's just one of the joys of it is sort of the surprising sort of turns that happen, but yes, and it is very much a love story, but it's not something that you'd find in the romance section.
Mhm.
If you know what I mean.
Is it a
So there-
difficult read? Is it hard to read?
I don't think so, but also it's sort of like sometimes like well, first of all, I will reiterate my whole thing that I always go on about with timing and books. It's not written in a very linear way. It's sort of like I didn't find it difficult. I've reread it many times. But even the first time I read it, I didn't find it difficult to sort of follow the story. But it has a sort of almost, occasionally it has a bit of a dreamlike quality to it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it is told from different perspectives as well, different character perspectives, which I know some people don't like, but I found the narrative really easy to follow. And it very, again, like it's I find it an emotionally affecting book in the same way that like Wuthering Heights, it's like you feel the feelings while you're reading it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's
Oh,
a
I
book
see.
I
Very
read.
intense. It's very intense.
Yeah.
One book I read again after like 50 years was The Other Side of Midnight by Sidney
Oh,
Sheldon.
I remember reading that. Yeah. What
That
was
was
that about?
fabulous.
I forget.
This guy falls in love with this woman. She's French. He tells her they're going to get married, but he never shows up. And then
I remember reading that.
she's
long time ago.
revengeful. And
Then doesn't
Anyway,
he
it was
marry
very-
someone else?
yes, he marries someone else, and he comes with her to see her. And they try, I don't know who, if you want to read it, they tried to kill her in the cave. And then they're on trial, him and his wife, for trying to kill her. But the best was the epilogue. She was saved, and she was at a nunnery. She went like sort of mental, but she got her revenge, and they both were found guilty.
I remember reading that years. So when did it come out? Do you know when we were all reading it at first?
Oh, I have to tell you, I'm married 50 years, so I remember reading it in my early years. So that's how old it is.
Yeah, I
That's
know. It's
At least
it's
40,
very
at
old.
least 40 years.
It was very popular. Everybody was reading. Did they make it into a movie?
Not that I know of.
Not
I
that,
think
no.
they did.
Oh,
Yeah, maybe
really?
that's what I'm
I
getting. it
think they
confused.
did.
Mhm.
Okay, and then
Um,
there was a sequel, but it wasn't as good. I forget what it was
So it was
called.
published in 1973 and it was
Uh-huh. Oh, then.
adapted. Yeah, it was made into a film in 1977
Oh, 'cause that's how
Oh,
popular it was. I remember we all read it.
with Susan Sarandon was in it. She's
Oh,
the only
Hmm.
name that I recognize. Marie-France Pissier, John Beck, Susan Sarandon, Christian Marquand, and Josette Banzet.
You don't know who
hmm.
Con is? Well, you can tell you're not our age.
yeah, exactly.
Nope.
No, you have a few years to come.
I'll get there. I'm sure I know some actors that you guys don't know.
Or
Maybe.
Barbara Streisand.
Barbara Streisand, I know.
But Katie, when you talk about romance novels or novels, is it true that sex sells, that every author has to have some sort of sex or something, even in the most staid novels? Like,
No,
is
of
it
course
true?
not. Of course not. I mean, it's all about, different types. And it depends on expectations, right? For so long, like for example, with movies, you couldn't watch a single movie like in the 80s without having some boobs shown, right? Like
Right.
it was like, and it was absolutely for no real reason. It was just like, it was one of the draws. It was like, that's something that had to happen or something for,
So in a romance novel, doesn't have to have that
no, I don't think so.
thing.
This was sort of one of the reasons why I wanted to have this kind of read what you want, like a somewhat themed read what you want, because I think that for a lot of us, when we hear romance novel,
Mhm.
we think Harlequin, like we equate it with that
That's true.
kind of
Mhm.
with that kind of book. And now, again, no judgment over here. Like there's a time and place for all kinds of things. But when I was urging you guys to read novels or to focus on the romantic elements of your novels, it's like, I mean, there are a ton of literary novels that have romance as central elements. It's like uh, lots of family stories, lots of character studies have to do with
Hmm.
romance. Think of like even Shakespeare. Oh, Carol just wrote a note that said her phone is almost dead and she's at her appointment. So that's she left us. But you think of Shakespeare, right? And whether it's a comedy or a tragedy, one of his plays, there's usually a romantic element to it that helps to move the story along or that is somehow necessary for the story. And it's not that it's like none of these things have to be focused on sex. Some are, and some are focused on sex and then have less to do with the romance. That tends to be a different kind of book. That's not something that we would think of as a romance novel. But it's more that I want us to all to think about the ways that with different genres we have this tendency to pigeonhole, right? So we have a tendency to say like, oh, I know what that is, or like just like we were talking about Danielle Steele earlier, right? And it's like, oh, Danielle Steele and romance, and this it wasn't so much romance, it was more something else. And again, this idea of the ideas or expectations that we have on what something is going to be like is not always anywhere but in our heads, you know?
Mhm.
So in the same way that I think I've told this story before, that years ago at the library, we used to have for staff a genre studies sort of class that we could take. And so one of them was all mystery oriented, and then the romance one came around and I thought, I don't want to read romance. And then I read, like 3 or 4 books and I thought like, oh, it's not like what I thought. It was this idea that I had as what a romance novel was.
Right.
And that's when I started sort of espousing this whole getting on my soapbox and talking my theory about, like Jane Eyre could be termed a
Right.
romance novel,
It's
right? Because
true.
that's a central theme the
Mhm.
story. And if you look at a lot of classic literature, like there's the romantic relationships actually form like a really important part of the narrative. So even looking at sort of more modern literature, you can see how in a way like it's these different it's relationships, right? Like any good writing, to my mind, illuminates some sort of element of human nature. And so one of the things that we all sort of contend with is our relationships with other people. And one way, like one kind of relationship that we live with is our romantic ones, whether they're failures or successes, and what qualifies a success, what qualifies failure, like especially more of the modern romance, like typically romance novels that you might read with between the covers is it's dealing with they're almost coming of age novels too, right? Like they'll have the central character who's in her 20s or something, and it's like figuring out what she wants and how to be and how to live her life. And part of that is in our culture at our time of living right now, this is a successful romantic relationship is with someone who you can like grow together with, right? As opposed to necessarily just I just said just, and I don't want to say just, as opposed to having just did it again, as opposed to having a shared ideology of some kind. Like some people at like present and in the
Talk
past.
about- To be honest with you, you're talking about the Hallmark movies.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly that, where the girl is very disillusioned in the big city, and then she has to go home to her small town, and
Yes,
there she
it's
gets
so
the old boyfriend, and
formulated. Oh,
and that's it. I find
Yeah.
that fascinating what you're talking. It's like you could
Yeah.
write a script on the whole Hallmark movies, one after another,
Well,
exactly the
so
same.
speaking of romance novels and Hallmark movies, there's a book by Emily Henry called Book Lovers that I read a few months ago.
They brought it today.
Yeah. This
well,
is
what's his name?
so
Mobile
the
library.
I feel like I
Yeah.
might have talked about it
Can't
in a
let somebody go
past
so long.
book discussion group, but it opens
So I
up with this woman who works in publishing, and she's talking about how she's like, the romantic comedies where or the Hallmark movie or the romance novel where like there's the guy who goes from the big city to the small town and ends up falling in love with the daughter of the Christmas tree salesperson in the small town. But he's like already dating some heartless B word in the big city, until they break up and whatever. She's like, well, I'm the heartless one in the big city. She's like, this exact scenario has happened to me like 3 times. And she tells the different stories of how these things happened. Anyway, and it's I find Emily Henry absolutely charming. Like I've read now several of her books and I find her just absolutely charming. So
Oh.
again, it's not necessarily something that I would have known that I would gravitate towards, but it's like a really good, satisfying romantic comedy. Like talking about movies, When Harry Met Sally, is there better?
Oh,
Like
yeah,
it's just like
exactly.
Moonstruck. I know, Roseanne, we've talked about that before. Like it's just like there's something
You
incredibly
got
satisfying
Or
about the
Sleepless in
story
Seattle was
arcs.
the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And
this one?
what with Valentine's Day having just happened, and I do a poetry group. I don't know if you guys know this. I do a little poetry group with the Cumming Center at the drop-in. Anyway, one of the poems that I brought was a Shakespearean sonnet. It's my favorite Shakespearean sonnet, which I know sounds nerdy as all get out, but it's sonnet 130. And one of the things so I think a lot of people know about Shakespeare or are more familiar with Shakespeare's, what is it?
Romeo, yeah.
The rough wing, rough, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Basically, where shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You know that poem, that sonnet? So where it's basically saying like, oh, you're so wonderful. Like, even though a summer day is wonderful, you're even better. That's not sonnet 130. Sonnet 130 is, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If hair be wire, or no, if snow be white, then her breasts are done. If hair be wire, black wires grow from her head. I have seen roses damasked, both red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, though I know music hath a far more pleasing sound. Granted, I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. That's the poem. So it's basically saying, it's comparing her unfavorably to all kinds of things, right? It's not putting her up on a pedestal. But what I love about this poem is it's saying, I love her. I love her for who she is, not for who society is telling me she's supposed to be, right? Anyway, that's my whole love story.
I wonder how many people are writing books now about the LGBTQ and all that, love romance novels.
Lots.
They're
And we have a
gonna be
lot here
start-
at the library. Yeah, we have a lot
You
here at the
do?
library.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, really. That should be interesting.
And a lot of them
You
are
know.
very poppy as well, like like they're fun, light, sort of page turning reads. That's Mairead's got to have included some of those in her book club. No, Carol?
No, who did you say?
The one we just-
LGBTQ plus? Any
No,
like
who's book
themed
club?
Mairead.
The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That was about it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, but we have a bunch of them. Like I see them all the
Really?
time and have read some of them.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, not Mairead. No. Mad Honey is a bestseller now.
Yeah.
That's very good, Rona.
Is it
Have
a
you
love
read Mad-
story?
No. It's a murder
Yeah.
and the twist with the LGBTQ. I never get them
Yeah.
right.
Mairead, we read a book with Mairead. Guys, Carol. The two
Pardon
guys.
me?
I forget the name of the blue
right.
cover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the name of that. Mhm.
And there was, what did we read recently that had there was
Oh, yeah, I think
The
so.
Vanishing Half. In The Vanishing Half, do you guys remember in The Vanishing Half? A
Oh,
beautiful part
yeah.
of that love story was between
Yeah.
basically the granddaughter of one of the main characters, the granddaughter, and a trans man.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we remember it now.
Yeah, these
But you
They-
never
they come up.
knew that. Yeah, they were good. Yeah, that's true. They lived together.
Yeah, and they had the healthiest, one of the healthiest relationships. in
That's
the-
right.
in the whole
Yeah.
book. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There was a book too I just read. I don't know if it was with you or about she was a man turned into a woman and had a relationship with somebody who loved her, but she committed suicide at the end. She couldn't cope with it. I forget what it was. Some good author. It was a relatively new book. So I guess that was one that I did read. So I've started, I guess they
Yeah.
started coming out. It was relatively new too. I forget the name of it.
So this
But
sort of
that's interesting.
it comes back to what you were asking earlier and what we were talking about, which is like the ways that our like literature, that our everything reflects our culture, right? It's
Yeah,
that
each
it's not that,
decade, I guess, every
Yeah.
decade probably, yeah.
and this is it, is that like it's not that, trans people and queer people didn't exist before the present. It's that
Right,
now that there's more of we have more of an access to their voices, that they're being
Mm.
published in the same way that it's not like people of color weren't writing before, but they weren't being as published as widely, as they started to be. And again, it's still not, there's no parity, but it's it depends on what our societies also say, values, in the same way that, again, before that, we weren't reading a lot of women writers, a lot of women authors. If they were published initially under men's names, right?
Right.
Because that was just, again, it was a societal bias that was being reflected in what was being produced and what people then had access to.
Why do people write, some not writers write under their own name and also under pseudonym? Is it because they don't want to get too popular, or they write too many books? Why would they write under their own name and another name?
Right.
Well, I think there are different reasons. Some of them, like Nora Roberts and JD Robb, it's a marketing.
Yeah.
It's partly marketing so that you
It is
know sort of what
marketing.
you're getting. Some of
Uh-huh.
them, it might be, again, like out of embarrassment, like Carol was saying earlier, you know, her friend who was a writer, but who wrote Harlequin to pay the bills. She didn't want,
Mhm.
if someone looked into, like, sort of researched her name, for it to come up with Harlequin, because she knew that she
Right.
would end up being pigeonholed, probably especially as a woman, right? A woman author.
Mhm.
It might be because of like, who is it? J.K. Rowling, when she came out with her, like Robert
Harry Potter.
Galbraith,
Oh.
like she published under name Robert Galbraith, and initially, what it was said was that she was publishing under another name, because she didn't,
With
she
Harry
wanted to
Potter.
see, yeah, she didn't want like it to be influenced by
Right.
the Harry Potter. And then, and I don't know if any of this is true, then the rumor was that like her publishing company actually leaked that it was J.K. Rowling, because the sales were like flatliney. So like, I don't know, there are a bunch of different reasons. Maybe someone who, yeah, is trying something out, but they don't want it linked to their name for whatever reason, like their true name, or else they think that it's going to be super popular and they don't want to
It's also a
be.
different genre.
Yeah, it can be because of that, but other people don't do that, right? Like other people will write under the same name, whether they're writing mystery or literary or
Yeah, but they might
whatever.
get flack for that from the publishers, because people say, "Yay, I picked up a J.D. Rowling, but it's not about magic. It's about life story of a newt." So I would imagine that people don't want to. They buy what they follow an author, and then all of a sudden it's not the same kind of thing. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, so that's it when we were talking about marketing, how
That's right.
sometimes, yeah, but I don't think there's just one reason.
No.
I'm gonna have to leave you. I have to walk the dog. Will you let us know about next week, next time, what we have
I
to
will let
read?
you know about next month. Next month will be a traditional book club, and we're going to do the book by Elizabeth Strout called My Name is Lucy Barton.
Oh, okay.
Just arbitrarily chosen, so that I can tell you what it is and we can all read it in time for next month. And I'm going to send out another email too about the themes sort of moving forward, because we delayed this one from last week. I just wanted to choose a book. It's not too thick. It's not a super challenging read, but it has a lot of interesting things to talk about. So that's why I chose that one. Some of you may have read it before. It's one that can handle a reread.
Okay, I think you gave it to us, right? I think I have it at home. I think I knew that you were, or so I'm thinking of something else. This is something new. We didn't know we needed that.
No, we didn't.
Oh,
This is
okay.
it, is that this was the last sort of scheduled
Okay,
theme for us. So I'll send out an email to everyone, sort of with a proposal of what the next
that's
ones
great.
are,
Yeah,
along
I
with a
heard it
couple
was
of other
good.
questions.
That's great.
Okay, just to
Thank you.
let you know, if you're gonna go to the second Tuesday, I have the last art thing on also the Tuesday, the 14th. So,
Next week or next month?
yeah, so it would be the 21st, I would be
Okay.
available.
Yeah, so that's maybe, okay, you know what, guys? I'm just gonna send out an email today, and we'll have a little email confab about
Okay.
what to do moving forward.
Great.
Okay. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. It was lovely to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank
It
you.
was
It was
great.
lovely. Here in
Bye.
Toronto, the sun is coming out.
Oh,
have
enjoy
Bye.
it.
Here too. Okay.
Good to see you, everybody. Good to see you, Shirley.
Yeah, we'll see you when you come back.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Okay.
I'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Looking forward to
Bye.
it. Bye, Rona. Have a good walk.
Bye, dear.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye, bye.